Good morning. That was sad. Good morning. I know there aren't very many of you out there, but I still want to hear it. For those of you that didn't notice, I am not Tom. I'm a little bit taller, a little bit better looking. Tom is in Illinois today, visiting family, and he asked me a couple weeks ago if I'd be willing to preach today, and my answer was a loud and resounding absolutely not. And he kept after me for the last couple weeks, and I finally agreed to it this week. So here I am, I guess. I've been reading Ezekiel for my quiet times lately. And little miniature, tiny history lesson for those of you out there. Ezekiel was preaching to not only Israel, but also Judah. Now, what's the difference? Israel and Judah had split after King Solomon was king. Basically, the southern part of the kingdom split off from the northern part, and they were just kind of separate, right? The northern kingdom had bad king and bad king and bad king and bad king and bad king, all bad. And eventually, they were exiled. They went into Babylon. Later on, Judah, which had like kind of a bad king, bad king, bad king, good king, bad king, bad king, bad king, bad king, good king, was also exiled. At the time that Ezekiel was preaching and writing, Israel was already gone and Judah was still there. So he was preaching to both of them, right? And there's your little history lesson for the day, so take that for what it's worth. But Ezekiel was preaching to both of them, and most prophets in the Old Testament, they kind of have almost like a poetic sense to what they're saying. They preach poetically, and the books are written in Hebrew poetry. And you kind of get this whole like, repent and turn from your evil ways and be saved, and this kind of like, but it's very like pretty and poetic, and it's very it's where we get like Isaiah and Lamentations and like all these beautiful kind of flowery language type Old Testament books. But Ezekiel's different, because Ezekiel almost does like street theater. If you read through the book, God gives him all these like object lessons, right? He does all these bizarre things, like he lays on one side for weeks, and then he lays on the other side for weeks with his hand tied up above his head somehow. I don't really know how it was done, but he has his hand tied up above his head. God tells him to take a sword and shave off your head and your beard. Shave off your head. Wow. Shave off your hair and your beard, and then to like scatter a third of it into the wind and cut a third of it and then burn a third of it, but then light a fire with poop and make a loaf of bread and eat it, and it's just like this really nasty, like it's disgusting. But like he tells him to do that. What else does he do? Oh, God tells him, take all of your possessions from your place, is what it says in my Bible, and I think it just means his house. Take all your possessions from your place and hold them up on your shoulder and cover your eyes and dig a hole through the town wall and walk out through it. And it's like all these bizarre things, right? And there's visions in there too where like God is leaving Israel and he's leaving Judah and he's departing, he's taking off. And like all these bizarre things that God tells Ezekiel to do, and he does them and he explains these things to the men that are watching him do these bizarre things in the middle of the street is kind of what I picture. And you get the sense that the message is just very clear. And the message is basically this: God is saying to Israel and Judah, you have messed up, and now I'm going to mess you up. You have sinned. You have done exactly what I told you not to do, and for that I'm going to punish you. You have worshipped idols. You have oppressed the poor. You have committed adultery. You have done all these awful, terrible things that I have told you time and time and time again not to do. And because of your sin, I'm going to mess you up. And as I read through Ezekiel, I'm maybe a third of the way through it now, I realize that is God's proper response to me. Based on my sin, based on the things that I've done, God's proper response, the just and right and perfect thing for him to do, is to punish me. based on the sins I've committed, based on what he's told me time and time and time and time again not to do, that I keep doing, God's proper response to me is to judge me. And that's a sobering thought. But God's funny, isn't he? Because he doesn't do that. Even in the book of Ezekiel, where it is pure judgment coming down on Israel and Judah, there's still hope. Later on in the book, God tells Ezekiel to talk to them and say, look, all this is going to happen to you and it's going to be awful. But in the end, there will be hope. In the end, I'm going to gather this remnant together, right? And I'm going to make you into a nation again. And from you is going to come a Savior. From you is going to come salvation for everybody, not just you. And in my life, and in your life, and in everybody's life, God is funny. Because we deserve this. We deserve this punishment. We deserve this judgment, and yet he removes it. He takes it away. He shows us what's called mercy. In Psalm 103, it says this: as far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. For he knows how we are formed. He remembers that we are dust. One of my college professors once put it this way. I don't remember which college professor it was, otherwise I would cite him and say, give him credit for everything that he taught me. But he put it this way once. He said, east from west is infinite, right? Think about this. If you go far enough north, eventually you start going back south and north ends, right? You go far enough north and it stops being north and it starts going south again. So eventually it ends. But if you go east, you keep going east. You never start going west again unless you turn around and go the other way. And so literally, as far as east is from west is forever. So as far as forever, as far as infinity, God takes our punishment, he takes our sins, and he pushes them away from us. It's like he takes that sin and he puts it in a place where it will never be able to come back to haunt us again. And he takes, along with our sin, our judgment and our punishment, and he pushes them away as far as forever from us. And if that was it, if that was all God did for us, if that was the only thing that Christ came to die for, if that was it, that would be more than we deserve, wouldn't it? It would be more than we deserve to have our sin and our punishment taken away. But God is even funnier. He's even stranger. Because he knows that even with our sin taken away, even with our judgment removed from the final total, we're still not going to make it. Even with sin and judgment and pain and all that good stuff, bad stuff, subtracted from our final tally, we're still not going to make it to him. We're still not able to be good enough to make it to God. Mercy is a negative transaction. It takes away something that we deserve. Mercy, as my dad used to tell me and my siblings, is not getting what you do deserve. It's negative. It gets taken away. But God knows that it's not enough. And so he offers us what's called grace. In Romans 3:20 through 24, it says this: for everyone has sinned. We all fall short of God's glorious standard. Yet God, with undeserved kindness, declares that we are righteous. He did this through Christ Jesus when he freed us from the penalty of our sins. If mercy is negative, if mercy is the removal of the thing that condemns us, then grace is positive. Grace is the gift that we're given in order to be able to make it to God, in order to be good enough. If mercy is not getting what you do deserve, then grace is getting the exact opposite. Grace is getting exactly what you don't. Mercy subtracts, and grace adds. And we know from Sunday school or from reading about it or from whatever, that grace is manifest in Christ. God sent his Son to be our sacrifice, to make the way for us to make it to God. He sent his Son not only to remove our guilt from us, but also to give us the gift that we need to be able to make it to God. And as I think about this, I'm amazed. Because I realize, from moving from point A to point C, I guess, I realize that what I deserve and what I get are not at all the same. They're not even close. And as I think about the God who does this for me, I'm just completely in awe. I'm completely caught up in how in the world do I pay this back? How in the world, what am I supposed to do? What is my response to this supposed to be? There's a little village in Indonesia, little Christian village, and they had, their church building in their village, and they I guess were a prosperous little town, and one day they were attacked by ISIS. And ISIS came, and 500 militants came, and they torched their houses, and they killed people, and they did all the horrible things that ISIS does because they're ISIS. And a bunch of the villagers took refuge in the church building. And ISIS entered the building, and they started shooting. And they killed 211. And wounded 140 of my brothers and sisters. And later on, these villagers, I guess they regrouped and they started, burying the dead and kind of trying to figure out, what are we supposed to do? And they asked God, God, what are we supposed to do? Like, we don't have a village, we don't have a church to worship you in anymore. We don't have anything anymore. It's all been taken away from us. And God said, I want you to take up an offering. But I don't want you to use it to rebuild. I want you to take it, and I want you to give it to the Muslims who attacked you so they can renovate their mosque. So they did. They took up an offering, and they gathered $5,000, the equivalent of 5,000 US dollars, which is like a massive amount of money for a tiny Indonesian village. And they took this money, and they gave it to the ISIS leader. And the ISIS leader and a bunch of these militants, they were so touched and so impacted by this gesture that they became open to hearing the gospel. And a bunch of them converted. And they didn't stop there, though, because they went, we did horrible things to you. What can we do to help you? And the village, the Christian village was like, go into the woods and cut down some bamboo so that we can start to rebuild. And they went and cut down like a ton of bamboo, and they started rebuilding this village. And then the government, the Indonesian government, noticing what was happening, they saw what was going on here. They took notice of this, and they gave $15,000 to the Christian village for them to rebuild. And now they have a church that is nicer than the one that they had before. And this is just a perfect picture, isn't it? This is just a true-to-life metaphor of like what the grace of God is capable of, what the love of God is able to do in lives. As I was reading through and looking for material to give the sermon today, I came across all kinds of YouTube videos and articles and everything about people forgiving those people that had hurt them, right? And I came across this video that we're going to show here in a second, and bear with me because they are speaking Arabic, so it is subtitled, so read fast. read fast, bear with me, don't expect English because it's not in English, but it's this little girl who was driven out of her home along with her family, and she's in this refugee camp. And I just want you to, if you can catch it, I want you to read what she says. Go ahead, Pam.
قولي لي انت بقالك قد ايه هنا في المخيم؟
4 أشهر.
ايه اكتر حاجة انت حاسة ان هي كنت بتحبيها في كراكوش مش موجودة هنا دلوقتي في المخيم؟
كان عندنا بيت وكنا متونسين، بس يعني هنا ما متونسين، بس الحمد لله يعني الله سترنا.
قصدك ايه؟ يعني ايه الله سترنا؟
يعني الله حبنا وما قبل يعني يقتلونا داعش.
طيب انت حاسة قد ايه ربنا بيحبك صح؟
أيوة، ربنا بيحبنا كلنا، مو بس أنا، كل الناس يحبوهم الله.
وانت شايفة ان ربنا كمان بيحب الناس اللي ممكن تبقى اذتك وزعلتك ولا لا؟
يحبوهم بس ما يحب الشيطان.
طب انت شايفة، انت حاسة بايه ناحية الناس اللي ممكن تبقى خرجتك من البيت وتعبتك؟
ما راح أسويهم ولا شيء، بس يعني أقول لله يسامحهم.
انت فاكرة ترنيمة او فاكرة حاجة لما بتبقي قاعدة لوحدك كده بتحبي ترنميها او تكلمي يسوع بيها، ولا مش فاكرة ولا حاجة خالص؟
عندي ترانيم.
طب تحبي تقولي اكتر واحدة انت بتحبيها؟ تبقى صغيرة وقصيرة بس نسمعها منك، ايه رأيك؟
أكو واحدة.
Jesus said it like this in Matthew 5:42 through 47. You've heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? And again, in Romans 12:20, it says this: on the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Now, when I think of my enemies, I typically think of old coworkers, not current coworkers, Dana. I think of old coworkers, basketball rivals from high school, and that idiot who cut me off on the bypass yesterday. Who has had this experience, right? You're driving along down the bypass, and it's like, and he cuts like across 5 lanes. Are there 5 lanes of traffic? 4 lanes of traffic. There's that middle lane down there in the middle. Don't shake your head at me. There's across 5 lanes of traffic into your lane when there was obviously another lane right beside you that he could have gone into. And it's like, why did you pull out in front of me? Right? And immediately you get angry. And it's like, oh, why did you do this? Especially Bob Wright can attest to this. When you're on a motorcycle and that happens, it's like, and you freak out, and it's like, oh my goodness, like you feel like you're gonna die, and like the words come at least to your mind, if not out of your mouth, and it's like, oh, why did you do that to me? And they're my enemy. Another person that comes to mind, my wife encouraged me to share this story this morning. Another person that comes to mind is a coworker at one of my old jobs, the last job that I had before I came here, and I'm not going to tell you her name because some of you might know her. But anyways, she was awful. Just say that. She was overbearing. She was accusatory. She was lazy. She was all these things, right? But she would always try to schlep off all of her junk onto me. And I'm not really sure why. It's like immediately when she got, I was there first, by the way, I had seniority, but immediately when she got there, she just, right away, it was like just off on the wrong foot and just continued stepping on that wrong foot over and over and over until I had a stub toe that was the size of Kansas. And it was like, no matter what I did, I was friendly to her, and then I was nasty to her, and then I was friendly to her, and then I was nasty to her, but like no matter how I interacted with this woman, I couldn't get her to like me. We just wouldn't get along, right? And so it's like so paperwork. She wouldn't get her stuff done, and she'd blame it on me. The car, we had company cars. The company car would be out of gas, and she'd blame it on me. All of it is like you name it, she would do it. And it's like she drove me insane, right? She was bad words. She was not a nice person, and I couldn't stand her. And my wife, loving and patient as she is, can totally attest to this because I would come home and like rage about how awful this woman was. And that woman was my enemy. I couldn't stand her. And honestly, as I stand here this morning, shamefully, I think about that idiot on the bypass, and I think about this woman from work, and I think about even old people I used to play basketball against, right? And I think about those people, and my immediate reaction is anger. My immediate reaction is bitterness and like hatred and like I can't stand that person. And in my sin, in my shame, I want those people to experience the judgment of God. I want those people to experience pain and suffering and punishment while I get off scot-free. I want them to have to go through all that, but I want to be nice and comfy and cozy and fine and warm and fuzzy on the inside. It's just so wrong. Because if I have brothers and sisters who live halfway around the world who can forgive ISIS for the awful things that they're doing, I have absolutely no right to hold on to the bitterness that I hold on to. If I have a God who can forgive me even though I spit in his face daily, I have no right to hold a grudge against the idiot who pulled out in front of me on the bypass. God came not just for me. And his mercy and his grace and his forgiveness and his love don't just apply to me. They apply to you. They apply to everyone you meet. And if I'm going to be selfish enough to think that I want these people to be punished while I am not, then I have another problem to deal with. So I guess this morning as I close out, my challenge to you is just simply this. As you go through your week, as you go through your life, as you get cut off in front of that is just my pet peeve. I'm going to keep returning to that because my pet peeve. If you get cut off in front of the bypass this week, or if that coworker is just being so annoying this week, or whatever, remember God's grace. Remember the love that he's shown to you. And think about ways that you can pass that on and show it to everyone else around you. Because we're given a lot that we don't deserve. And we owe it to God and to our fellow people to give it back to them.